What's going on, guys? Snake Eyes here, bringing you some more Bloodborne, and in this video we're going to be doing a weapon showcase, and the weapon we're going to be showcasing today is the Reiterpallasch. Now, this barely won the straw poll by about 5%. This was actually the very first time that I actually did a straw poll where I wanted you guys to pick out which weapon you wanted to see for the next showcase. And with that being said, it was fucking awesome to see this thing neck and neck with the Chikage for a pretty long time, eventually outbeating it by only 5%. And to be completely honest, that was a pretty dope ass first straw poll. I'm definitely going to keep this thing going, but if you don't know how to get this weapon, it's actually pretty simple. All you need to do is go into the Castle Canehurst area, and then once you go inside the castle, if you just go to the right towards the back on the very first floor, you'll find a chest that has the Reiterpallasch, and then after that you can buy them from the bath messengers back at the Hunter's Dream. But that's pretty much how you get this weapon. Now we're going to go into the details of it. Since then, I've upgraded mine to +8, so my physical attack is at 131 with a 131 blood attack. It has 150 durability. The requirements for this weapon is that you need 8 strength, 12 skill, and 10 blood tinge. And it gets an E scaling in strength, an A scaling in skill, a D scaling in blood tinge, and a C scaling in arcane. I'm going to start talking about the pros and cons to each weapon separately, just because I feel it's a bit more organized and easier to understand that way. And with that being said, I'm going to talk about the rapier variation of this weapon first. There are pros and cons for the rapier version. Basically, the biggest pro that this weapon has going for it is that there is a ton of variety in that weapon's moveset. This is definitely a weapon that you want to use for more of a, I guess, a defensive playstyle. This weapon is not, when it's in its rapier variation, very fast, and you really have to just use the variety of moves that you have, basically at your disposal to find ways to counter the opponent in multiple different ways, so that way it doesn't become kind of a repetitive thing. The cons for this weapon is that its damage isn't the greatest, and the attacks are somewhat slow. It kind of goes back to me saying that you really have to find multiple ways to counter somebody, because this is not a weapon you're going to get 2 or 3 constant hits on. After the first one, the person is liable to just dodge out of that. And with that being said, it's really bad because the hitboxes in this game are actually pretty good, that some of the attacks might not connect, and if you pair that up with lag, it just makes it that much harder. This weapon has a lot of vertical attacks and a lot of thrusting attacks that it really doesn't take much to just avoid that. And to be completely honest, in some cases it is pretty hard to use the rapier version of this weapon, but that transitions into the bayonet pistol. For the most part, the biggest pro that this weapon has is that the attacks are really quick and they do some pretty decent damage. If you really want to full pressure somebody and you feel like maybe countering them really isn't doing it, then you definitely want to switch to this variant. And then after that, you can basically treat the weapon like it's a dagger and just go in and hit R1 like crazy. You pair that up with the fact that it also doubles as a pistol, and it actually allows you to do certain tactics that you really couldn't do otherwise. One of the things that I never really did in any of these fights, but I actually did it in my gank spank video, so if you want to check it out, feel free to do that, is basically you would want to get some bone marrow ash and equip it to your left hand gun, and then from there all you really need to do is wait for a good time to parry somebody with your right hand gun. And if you don't know, when you parry somebody, when they're kneeled down on the ground, they actually take, I think, 1.5 damage. So sometimes the visceral attack really just doesn't do the best. If you have real high blood tinge scaling and you're using something like the Evelyn and you use the bone marrow ash, if you combine that with the fact that the person's going to take 1.5 times damage, it's probably best to just shoot them with the gun instead of actually going in for the visceral attack. With that being said, one thing to note is, even though this weapon has blood tinge scaling, it only applies to the bullets that get shot out of the pistol. So even though you still have to meet the minimum requirements to use this weapon, you don't really have to invest a whole lot into blood tinge if you don't want to, and also if you don't really plan on using that pistol variant for shooting a whole lot. This one can really go either way. It's a pro or a con, really depending on how you personally look at it. When you're in the bayonet version of this weapon, the moveset is limited. you're only going to be doing, if you want to do melee attacks, R1s. Anything else is pretty much moved for the pistol. There's no charge attacks, there's no move set for R2 other than to just shoot your pistol, and you can do R1s into a transform, but as far as just talking about the pistol bayonet moveset by itself, any type of melee is really just going to be R1. Other than that, this weapon really doesn't have too much cons. I guess one obvious one that I can say is that when it's in its bayonet version, the range is bad, but I mean, the range gets made up by the fact that the rapier is its other half. But for the most part, that's pretty much going to wrap it up. There's a couple things that I want to say right before I end this video. The main one being is that I've been getting a few comments on my past weapon showcases about me showing some love to strength weapons and to quality build weapons. I do recognize that I actually have been doing a lot of skill-based weapons, and for this next showcase, since I already made the straw poll and people have already been voting, it is actually going to be the next one of those 3 weapons are going to be one of the next ones that I'm going to do, and unfortunately I think 2 of them are skill based weapons. But after that, I'm definitely going to make a straw poll of 3 strength weapons, and then right after that 3 quality weapons. So what I'm going to go ahead and say right now is, if you want one of those skill based weapons to get the next weapon showcase, make sure you vote for it now, because it will not pop back up for a pretty long time. The 3 weapons that it's in between are the Blades of Mercy, the Chikage, and the Stake Driver. So like I said before, if you want one of those weapons to be showcased, vote now, because those 3 are not going to get a shot for a very long time. So I wanted to go ahead and remind you guys that, and for the most part, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, take care.